It's been 8 years since Moana hit theaters, and this weekend, this Thanksgiving weekend, Moana 2 hits theaters. Is it better than the original? Let's talk about it. Hey Colonel, so I just got home from seeing Moana 2, and kind of before I get started in this review, I want to preface by saying, going into this, I was slightly concerned because I saw not any spoiler stuff, but just generalization thoughts that this movie wasn't that good. And so like that, I was, you know, the whole time I'm watching it, I'm ready for it to be bad. And that just didn't happen. So real quick before we dive into this review, if you're new here, consider subscribing so you don't miss any other reviews like this one. And let's dive into Moana 2. So starting with the non-spoiler stuff, the songs. That's probably the biggest thing to talk about here. And while I'll say this, there might not be as many catchy songs, like ones that like you can't really get out of your head, but they're more impactful and better. So like it kind of depends on what you want. Do you want a more catchy song, or do you want one that fits the movie better and is more cinematic and has better vocals and better, you know, everything, right? It kind of just depends on what you want, and I think that people are getting the two confused. One thing I think that is very obvious about this movie is that it has much better comedy. The original has the kind of, you know, I would call the Disney formula for comedy. It's funny, it has okay moments, you know, but this one actually had some like decent jokes in it, and they used the little coconut guys from the first movie as a lot of comic relief in this movie, which was great. Speaking of her colony, you get a lot deeper dive into her colony and just like the culture, as my girlfriend pointed out, which I'll be honest, I didn't notice that. Because in the first one, they only really dive into like, they show like some of the island things that they're doing. In this one, they talk about like the history. They show a lot more of like the quilts and like the drawings and stuff. They dive a lot more deep into it. And along with that, they actually have a crew this time that like is with them, so it's not just Moana and Maui. It's pretty cool. They also give some better plots to the returning characters, like I mentioned, the coconut guys. The first movie, they don't really have like a really like plot. They're just kind of there as the funny guys. In this movie, you learn a little bit more about them, and they're along for like the whole movie essentially. And the last thing I'll say is, while the first movie does look great and it's pretty hard to mess up like beach and water, it already looks really clear, so you know, naturally you're gonna have like a very fresh looking movie. This movie looks even better. Everything looks super detailed. The colors are what really popped here, and they just did better, which is what you kind of hope when a sequel comes out. And now for the spoiler stuff. So the movie does kind of take place, we're not given a specific time frame, but I'd say guesstimating probably within like 1 to 2 years after the original. The only reason I say that is because in the first one, we never really heard a mention of Moana's sister, and she is pretty little, like I would say no older than 5 in this movie. So, you know, maybe it was 5 years. Like when this movie starts, she's going to these different islands and she's trying to explore, right? So maybe, you know, she was born in that time frame. Who knows? But the main plot centers around Nalo, who is a god, which is kind of cool because it raises the stakes again, because we've only known of demigods at this point. So now we're getting a new god who he kind of is the reason why all of the different factions, I'll call them factions because I forget the actual word, the Islanders. And he's the reason that all of them split up, because the island that they were originally on, he, you know, created this giant storm. He doesn't like humans. He thinks that, you know, they're just bad. And I will say that was a slight, like, it was I'll call it the Disney formula of this movie, is that they never really did anything to him. He's just like the god who doesn't like humans. But it doesn't really bother me because we've had stuff like that in past Disney movies. So it's just kind of like, okay. He is the reason, like, when they're trying to get to this island, he's creating tornadoes and he's creating all this stuff just so that, because if they touch the island, then it allows, you know, it breaks the curse essentially. And he's pulled this island deep underwater that Maui has to lift up. So, you know, and eventually that they kind of squash that plan, and she dives down into the water sacrificing herself as the lightning is coming down on her and touches the island, breaking the curse. So you heard me mention that Moana has a sister, and she kind of, I wouldn't say replaces the role, but like kind of takes the position that the grandma took in the first movie, where she's like the kind of the very specific person that she's holding on to on the island, her reason for returning, as well as her family, you know, the rest of the islanders, but that is the one person that they focus on the most. And at least for me, it was, if not as good as the grandma, but about the same level. She even gives her like a seashell to like remember her, and it's all very sweet and works well, makes the movie have higher stakes. Probably the most interesting character in this movie is Matangi, I think I'm pronouncing that right. And when I first saw her, she originally like captures Maui, but not really. She's just kind of like has him there. She's not like trying to do anything. She just wants to be free of the trap that the big god set up for her, because she is inside this like giant like creature thing. I don't really know what it is. But at first I thought they were gonna make her like the side villain, like he's the god, but she's the one doing all his bidding. And that's not what happens. They actually threw me for a curveball, because all she really wants is for Moana to get there. She was the one that kind of helped her get out of there. And then at the very end of the movie, there's an end credit scene where she's talking to the god, and the god's like, oh, like, I wonder how she got there, and pretty much blaming her, and then like puts her in like cuffs, and I guess is gonna hold her prisoner even more. But I thought she was interesting because typically when you see that, would be the villain, but she's just kind of someone that was like desperate to get out of there, if that makes sense. You heard me mention that we also get a new crew. They're fine. They all have their little special things, but my favorite one by far is this old dude. He's like a farmer, and he's just kind of like the depressing old guy, but obviously it's a Disney movie, so he's not like depressed. He just has a bad attitude. He's fun. He does a lot of cool stuff, and he has these like coconut floaties that were kind of funny, and the rest of them add some cool. There's a girl who, she's like a crafter, and she like makes all these modifications to the ship. At one point they like fly almost over a wave, so that was really cool. Probably one of my favorite characters in the whole movie though, one of the coconut dudes from their big colony of coconut men. I think they're at least guys, but we don't know. He kind of like helps them out, like he has their little like stun like arrow things or whatever he has in his little straw, and he comes along as like an assassin type character. He was fun. Probably one of the biggest things, like I literally was like stunned that they did this, is at the very end of the movie, like I would say like the climax, Moana touches the island, and I thought, okay, well like that was gonna be it, but she's also struck by lightning, which like kills her, and I forget exactly what, but she gets surrounded by like all of her ancestors, like in ghost form obviously, and the sea brings her paddle that she's famous for holding, and you start to see tattoos go up her arm, and it's like glowing like the same way that it does for Maui, and that's the moment you realize she's gaining powers of like a demigoddess. So cool, so unexpected, because they easily could have just made it that she touched it and woke up like, oh, like I'm fine, and they didn't have a reason, because lots of Disney movies do that. But they changed a little bit, gave her new powers, and I believe, I'm not certain, because they never like really establish it, it's that like she has a more permanent connection with the ocean and can like control it more. That's really cool. And then at the very end of the movie, in the end credit scene, yes, there is a mid-credit scene. You see the big god kind of talking to that lady who I mentioned earlier, and he's just kind of like, you led her straight to me. How did that happen? She would have never known how to do it. And you see him, and he looks, like a kind of how you would expect a god villain from this universe to look like. And kind of setting up Moana 3, and I'm hoping that it ends the trilogy well. So yeah, guys, that is my review for Moana 2. Let me know if you're planning on seeing it this weekend. If you're, kind of on the fence based on the reviews that you've seen, please go see this for yourself. I saw the same reviews and was nervous about going to see it. Totally glad I went to go see it, because I don't agree with a lot of the opinions that are coming out about it. Go make your own choice or, reviews about the movie, and let me know down in the comments what you thought about Moana 2. Is it better than the first one? Is it about the same? What are your thoughts? And I will see you all in the next video, Colonels. Also, happy Thanksgiving, because this will probably be the last video I make before Thanksgiving. Until next time, Colonels. Peace.